This is Dennis Day with the Edge Group team, and we are live on our broadcast of the Getting Your Edge, How to Size Your Home and Life podcast. Our guest today is Representative Adam Smith from Washington 9th District. I'm here with my co-host, Judy Gratton, and we're here to discuss the implementation of a bill. Want to give us the name? It's pretty long.
It is End Hedge Fund Control of American Homes Act. And it's my understanding, Congressman Smith, that you and Senator Jeff Merkley are the two people that are presenting this bill.
There's a bill in the House and a bill in the Senate. So it's a companion legislation.
Oh, good. Very good. And Senator Merkley is from Oregon, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, Dennis.
Let's get going. If there are any questions that in the chat, interruptions and inappropriate content, we'll have a question and answer period about this is a live stream and may disagree. We respect each other's opinions. Representative Adam Smith, tell us what this bill is and why it's needed.
It's focused on a particular aspect of the housing market where you have hedge funds, large money funds that are buying up homes, the homes that people would initially be able to afford as a first-time home. They can then rent them out as real estate up in price. And the reason this is a problem, this is not the biggest reason that housing has become so expensive. Lack of supply is the biggest reason that housing has become so expensive. But this is a contributing factor, and it is growing. At the moment, it's about 3% of housing stock, but in certain key areas, it's much higher than that. I forget the communities exactly, but I think it's like a lot in the Southeast, the suburbs of large cities like Atlanta, Jacksonville, that kind of thing. And so it drives up the cost because when you have a large hedge fund with hundreds of millions of dollars at its disposal, sometimes billions of dollars, they come in and they make cash-only offers, no inspections, no nothing. And it is really hard for someone trying to piece together the down payment for their first home to compete with that. So they don't. They get driven out. But the bigger problem is something that is actually, I think, the largest economic problem that we face right now, and that is the concentration of wealth. What has happened over the course of the last 50 years is we've seen this massive shift in wealth towards investors and shareholders. They've figured out how to reward their investors and shareholders more than they reward their workers, and certainly more than they give back to the community. I think of the family I grew up in. My father was a ramp serviceman for United Airlines at SeaTac Airport. He was a baggage handler. The last year he worked, the year he passed away in 1985, he made $16 an hour in the city of SeaTac. And he bought the house that we lived in 10 years before that for $15,000. And then you look at how much the cost of housing has gone up since then. That same house lists for about $500,000 on Zillow now. The wages for your average baggage handler have only gone up to $29 an hour, nowhere near keeping up. And United Airlines, the company he worked for, the shareholders are doing great. And that's where all the money goes. So now, if you're a blue-collar person, you're trying to make it in the world, where do you find your wealth? You find your wealth primarily in two places. One, the job you work. What are they paying you? Two, what has worked for a lot of blue-collar families is housing. You scrape together the money, you buy that first house, it goes up in value, and then you're able to buy another one. Now, what the same corporations have done, where they've come in and taken the wages and put them into shareholder value, now they're going after the last bastion of blue-collar wealth creation, which is the value of your house. They're getting that increased value as the housing stock goes up. They're the ones who have bought it, and they're renting it back to you for a higher price. They just shouldn't be sucking the wealth out of communities in this way to reward people who already make an enormous amount of money.
I think that was wonderful. Thank you so much for explaining that. I can relate to that personally. Right after we had our first child, we bought our first house in Kirkland, Washington, which is now considered a high-end neighborhood. It was a modest 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 2-story home. I think we paid $88,000. 4 years later, we sold it for $111,000.
Right.
We fixed it up, but it gave us the ability to take that money, invest in something else. I was talking to a gentleman last week about a book called Capital that talks about wealth building throughout history. Any individual, the majority of their wealth was built on buying real estate. when you take that away from middle class America or first time home buyers making a living wage, hopefully a living wage, but you're taking away that chance for people to earn that money, to have that to leave to their family.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
And this is the broader economic trend in society that really has changed in the last 50 years, as so much of the economic incentives have gone towards investors and shareholders. I remember back in the 90s during the com boom and the tech boom when everything was going, and everyone was talking about how everybody can buy shares when you don't have to rely on your job anymore to make money. In the blue collar family I grew up in, we could have scraped together money and bought a few shares in some company. But that's not where you're making your money. The people who can buy 1,000,000 shares are the ones who are making money off of that. And they're not paying the wages and they're not giving value to working class families. And this is a problem across our economy. Now, this has been exacerbated in the housing area by the lack of supply because we haven't built enough housing to keep up with the demand. When you look at the economic insecurity that people face, I was just reading an article today in the New York Times about how good the economy is in terms of unemployment low, the stock market's going great, inflation even down. You have a situation where people's wages are actually, for the first time in a long time, exceeding inflation. And yet people still feel economically insecure. One of the biggest reasons is housing and food. Everybody has to have a place to live and food to eat. And that's the price crunch people are feeling. Even though other measures of inflation are down, if you can't afford a place to live, you're not going to feel those other benefits of the economy.
And we deal every day with people who want to buy a home or people downsizing who want to sell their home. The first thing they say to us is, where am I going to go? When I heard something on NPR regarding your bill, I was like, I know there is a shortage of inventory based on not enough new construction, but we don't need anything added to it to prevent people from being able to buy homes. And I have written offers. There was one family, I think we probably wrote 25 offers for them before they ever got anything like what they really wanted. No. And what were they fight? First of all, they had an FHA loan that was supposed to help people be able to buy a home. And instead it was a hindrance. We were fighting cash offers.
Right.
And in addition to hedge funds, there's international cash offers that have become really difficult for just your average blue collar or middle American worker to compete against. Is there anything that you know of in Congress?
Just to refresh my memory, I have a vague memory that certain localities have placed limitations on what foreign entities or individuals can buy in a given community. If you're moving here from someplace else, fine. But a lot of times you do have that investment piece coming in. And the final piece on your all cash offer thing is getting back to the point about investors and shareholders, which I don't feel like I've explained as clearly as I should. A lot of those cash offers are coming from individuals who are going to live there, and they're the shareholders. They're high up in the corporate chain, Amazon or Microsoft. They've been getting shares and have the cash because of how much the stock market has gone up. I am a capitalist, as Irish joke, with a name like Adam Smith. I don't have any problem with creating an environment where investors feel in that company or invest in. We've just pushed it too far in that direction. And Amazon's actually a good example. I feel bad picking on Amazon because everybody does this, and it's not just Amazon. But in my district, the example is really apt. So they have a warehouse down in Kent. I always like to joke. They call it a fulfillment center. But I've worked in warehouses. It's not a fulfillment center. It's a warehouse.
I've been in the houses. They are huge.
They're
huge.
spectacular. So your starting wages at that, says of a couple of years ago, it might be slightly higher now, but it was $16 an hour. If you told me back in 1983 and 84, when I was first starting to work, someone's going to pay me $16 an hour, I would have been excited. But you can't live on $16 an hour in Kent. Certainly you can't live in Bellevue, Kirkland, Seattle, but you can't live in Kent on $16 an hour because your one bedroom apartment is going for about $2,000 a month. Trust me, it doesn't. Now, why is Amazon paying their workers $16 an hour? It is an almost $3 trillion company, and their stock prices are through the ceiling. They're paying that amount because every little bit more they pay has a negative impact on the share price. People see it as They're not making as much money. Is the share price going to go up or down? They are rewarding their shareholders, and that's great. But now you've got these thousands of workers on the line level, the truck drivers who deliver for Amazon, who are barely eking by. And now these same people are competing with the Amazon shareholders and shareholders from other companies to buy a house. I live in Bellevue. My wife and I bought here 11 years ago. I could not afford to live in the house that I'm sitting in right now if I had to buy it today. Now you to compete against these people who come in and make a $2.5 billion cash offer.
Bellevue that sold for 100% over asking and they tore the house down. That's the kind of thing that there's just absolutely no way for the average American to grow that wealth like you're talking about if they can't even get in.
So here's what I want to see happen. I want to see those workers in those warehouses in Kent making $35 an hour. The share price would come down a little bit. The executives who have 1 million shares or whatever, they'd make less money. But then the people down below would be able to buy food, send their kids to college, maybe get a place to live. And that's what's just completely out of whack.
And I wonder, because for instance, we have condo that we have down in Long Beach that we go to frequently, and it is very much a resort community. People go down there to play and have fun and whatever.
Long Beach, Washington, I assume? No,
Yes.
Long Beach, California. Yes.
No, but I think this would probably be true in any case. And I don't care what part of the country you're in, that provide the services, the checkers in the grocery store, the gas station people, the cleaners, they can't afford to live close enough to even work there. And
The problem is spreading.
some of them are homeless, to be honest with you. That's a thing that I never thought I would see in this country. Some of them are living in fifth wheels in their parents' front yard. I know, I've talked to them, and it's shocking to me. I applaud what you're doing. I had another question for you along the lines of the hedge fund purchases. I don't know if it's hedge funds or corporate purchases of manufactured home parks where seniors live. I have clients that I've sold homes in these parks. They're getting to the point now because the space rents have risen so high that they're fixed income and cannot afford it. Is that part of your bill to look at that sort of thing? Because they can't move those homes. If they do, they can't sell them because they are expensive enough now that most people have to get a loan. And you can only move a manufactured home once, and after that, you can't get a loan.
No, it's not covered by my bill, but it is also part of the problem. Emailed with my staff about this earlier today. We will look into that aspect of it, which is basically corporations, hedge funds buying up mobile home parks and then pricing people out so they can build what they want to build.
I saw it probably 2 years ago, a busload of potential investors driving through a manufactured home park, Florida, so that the hedge fund or whatever could show them what a great profit maker this was. These were just people trying to live in their home with a set income they could afford when they bought there. I was appalled. At some point, when we don't have the people to support the economy on the bottom, the ones that need to buy food and need a place to live, and they can't do it anymore, doesn't that affect the shareholders? Don't they see that it's not trickle down, maybe trickle up? I don't know.
Yeah, Nick Hanauer, the early investors in Amazon, has written a lot about the problem you described. He refers to it that we need middle out economics instead of top down economics. The broader economy becomes hard to sustain if too many people can't afford to buy anything. Sadly, folks concentrate on higher end markets to keep this going, even as a substantial percentage of our population themselves and the economic trap you described.
So I have a question. I just read in LinkedIn that the top 20 hedge fund managers made record profit in 2023, $2 billion more than 2021, $67 billion. This is 20 hedge fund managers. Tell us, what will your bill do to prevent this continuing?
A lot of that money is made off of other investment. That's the larger problem I'm talking about. But in the short run, my bill will prevent them from making even more money off the backs of homeowners and renters and blue collar families who ought to be the ones getting the benefit of the increased value of real estate. So it will help in that regard. I think we have a major crisis in this country of too much wealth being concentrated in the hands of too few people and too many struggling simply to feed themselves and pay the rent. We need to be bold about our policies to address that. to get more of an even distribution. And you can make arguments about people ought to be rewarded for their effort and who is the government to step in and take money from one group to give to another group. But look, to a certain degree, the government has already stepped in to do that, but they're distributing the money the wrong way. Corporations only exist because the federal government allows them to exist. It is a corporate charter put into law. So we could change that law so that all the profit and all the money doesn't go to those few people. The tax advantages that these investors are given are overwhelming. The losses that they can write off, the different places that they can hide money from taxes, all to encourage investors. And look, again, I'm a capitalist. I don't want a socialist run system. I don't want a system where the government owns the means of production. I understand what that does, but there is a balance here. We have lost that balance.
And it's not an either or, it's both. We can do both. We used to do both and we don't anymore. That's why I so support what you're trying to do with this bill. We invited several people to listen in today. She sent me a long text referring to the corporate takeovers of many businesses, childcare, veterinary services, pet grooming services, auto repair. Those were some examples she sent to me.
Healthcare.
Oh, well, healthcare.
For-profit companies, you are striking that balance between investors get a reward, workers are paid a decent wage, and the companies take care of the community. Once you get into publicly traded companies, the share price can always be a quarter point higher. You can always slash one more thing to drive up profits and revenue. You take profits and put them into stock buybacks, which drive up the price of shares at the expense of reinvesting in the company for the workers in the community. And that small group of people that's able to get into that shareholder world that can then make all of that money, that gives them an enormous amount of power and leaves everyone else struggling to pay the bills.
Struggling to pay the bills, that's the reality.
How would this bill implemented, what would it say do to change this dynamic?
First of all, it initially bans any sort of hedge fund. If your fund is over, you can't buy houses anymore. You can't buy them for investment purposes. And then on a sliding scale over the course of 10 years, it requires those funds to divest the houses. So basically, it's a ban on those sorts of hedge funds purchasing residential housing.
Is this going to have any effect on the mom pop investor who did well, bought a condo, rents it out, gets an income, then sells it for a profit?
No, that's why we set that threshold valuation. My in-laws moved to Portland 30 some odd years ago, and they started buying up property just like this, starter homes. My father-in-law was a very talented craftsman, so they would rebuild them and then maybe rent them out for a while or sell them. That's another way that blue-collar people make money if they can afford to do it and have the skills. So no, it does not affect that.
And in reading your information, I also noticed that you talked about how when hedge funds own real estate, a couple of things happen. Number one, they don't take care of it as well as a small owner might. And number two, the rents have a tendency to be higher and go up more. And number three, they're quicker to evict people. They're not willing to work with them.
Yeah, we ran into that both during the pandemic and the financial crisis, the Great Recession in 2008, 2011. You had a lot of people who were trapped with the changing economic circumstances. We would work with them to rejigger their mortgage, rejigger their rent payments. Everyone always said, if it was a local person who owned the property, whether commercial or residential, you could usually work it out. But when you had the large conglomerate, they're just bean counters. They're not looking to negotiate anything. You're not paying, you're out. So yeah, I agree with that point.
I was in real estate at that time. I remember one home in particular where I was showing it. It was vacant. It was in a short sale. We walked in, and in the child's bedroom, they had written on the walls all the way around the room, from the top of the ceiling to the floor, what happened to their family. I was in tears when I left that house. These sorts of things aren't just numbers on a board. They're human beings, and it's tragic when they lose their home, no fault of their own.
I think the housing crisis is a crisis. We're still stuck in old thinking about how to address it. I've received criticism for this bill as government overreach, blocking the private sector. We still have permitting and zoning processes that make it very difficult to build housing, even as we have this incredible need. It's time for radical thought because I don't think people fully appreciate the impact it's having on our society that housing.
I agree completely. And also, at one point, a couple of years ago, heard, and I don't remember what source, that there were literally entire neighborhoods being purchased up by hedge funds.
Wherever a house comes up for sale in these neighborhoods, and then they control the market. They're coming in to rent a place. They own all the places. So you have to pay what they're willing to pay. Now, one of the things that really empowers them is the limited supply. The more these large corporate investors property, the less incentive they have to build more because they build more. They're just driving down the price of their rental property. It's all kinds of bad to have these groups coming in there. It's not dissimilar to the subprime mortgage crisis, where they figured out a way to mortgages and then sell them and take the profit. Now they're commoditizing single family homes to also take the profit.
Food, investing in things like multifamily apartments or condominium complexes.
We don't touch multifamily apartments in this bill. And yeah, it's a slightly different situation. But again, I would think it would be a problem if too many apartment buildings were owned by hedge funds for the reasons that Judy just mentioned a minute ago about how they approach ownership of rental property differently than a local company or a small investor would.
How much chance does this bill have? Where is it in the process?
At the moment, it has no chance to move through this particular Congress. The Republicans control Congress are not inclined to be supportive of this because they support business more than the individuals in this context. What I'm trying to do is spark the conversation so that one day soon, this will be passable. It will grow in bipartisan support and move forward. Politics and public policy, you have to be patient and persistent. You rarely come up with an idea and a month later it's enacted. It's the nature of our system that you got to work through the process. This is the first step in building the level of support necessary to hopefully be able to move this legislation forward.
As realtors, I personally, and I think I can speak for Dennis, part of the reason I got into this business is because I wanted to see people be able to buy homes to live in, not just to get a commission, but because it's important for us to all have a place to feel safe. And when I heard what you were doing, it really resonated with me as a realtor to want to support the idea of middle-class America being able to own their homes. Anything that we can do to help spread the word, that's what we're trying to do here today. Please don't hesitate to let us know. You and your staff have just been incredibly accommodating to come and do this with us. I know you're very busy, right?
There's a lot going on in the world. This is an important issue, and I appreciate you giving me the chance.
Right now, to purchase a median priced home in King County, they're estimating you need $180,000 as a family.
Yeah.
And we are in a high wealth area. Even with the high wealth area, that's putting homes out of reach of many, even the tech.
As Judy pointed out, we're in a high wealth area, but not everybody participates in the high wealth aspect of it. You've got all of these jobs. I go back to the airport. I represent SeaTax where my father worked all those years ago. You got a lot of people working out at the airport, and a lot of them making 15 to 20 bucks an hour. Go back to the fulfillment center in Kent. You have a lot of people, and these jobs have to be done. You need someone to do them, and you're paying them a wage that they can't live on.
If a low income worker is working extra hours and is not making enough to purchase food and rent, how are they going to buy the things that Amazon sells?
That's the middle out economic point that Nick Hanauer makes. He started out Pacific Feather. They made pillows and comforters. He's now worth probably $1 billion. He says, no matter how much money I'm worth, there's only so many pillows I'm going to buy. You need to broaden the base of people who need to buy this and who need to buy new furniture or whatever. If people can't afford that, then you're lowering the market and it's long-term harmful to the economy. Capital is mobile. We have a global economy. Once people move capital around the world to where they can get a return on it. So to some extent, the folks at the top end survive and they got a pretty big cushion. But I think the real issue is the way it divides our society between the haves and the have-nots. There's no such thing as true equality. I know my friends on the far left will argue with me about that, but there's not. Some people are going to work harder. Some people are going to get lucky. Things are going to happen. But the question is, how big is that gap? Society will tolerate a certain gap, but when you've got so many people struggling to pay for food, housing, healthcare, education. I grew up on the lower end of the economic scale, but I could afford college. I worked from the time I was 11 years old. It was handed to me by any stretch of the imagination, but it was doable. I'd bought my first house right before I met my wife for $94,000, a townhouse in Kent in 1992. That pushed me a little bit, but I was able to do it. Now you've got this huge gap where people can't buy a house, struggle to pay rent, can't afford education without going hopelessly in debt, and struggle to pay for healthcare. And that's a concentration of wealth that is leaving too many people too far behind.
How can tax reform help on this?
Tax reform, biggest way it could help is to go after some of those advantages that I mentioned that are existing in the tax code that reward investors. Heads win, tails you lose scenario where they make money, they get to keep it. They don't make money, they get to write it off. There are all kinds of things in the tax code that make it easy for people making a ton of money to not pay much in the way of taxes. It's not the rates so much as it is the write-offs and exceptions and deductions. So yeah, if we were to reform the tax code to take away those write-offs and simplify it, that would make a huge difference as well.
Top of government, I hear people saying we need, and it's okay, then what? How are you going to maintain the roads? I've heard people say, that I don't want to pay my taxes. That's great. But the hospitals, the policemen, the schools, all the things that you take advantage of will be gone. Is that what you want? I don't understand it. And I don't think that's really what people want. I think, like you said, where everybody gets to make something. No, it's not going to be perfect. Yes, there'll be people at the lower end of the spectrum and at the higher end of the spectrum, but that gap does not have to be this large.
Sorry, that's part of the process. I smile because you're taking me back to one of the earliest conversations from my political career and making people understand what taxes go to. And look, and the government's got to work to be more efficient and effective. I was campaigning for re-election back in 1994 when I was in the state Senate and doorbelling in Normandy Park, a nice little community in the South End. It was in the 33rd legislative district. And 1994 was a very anti-government year. Democrats, I'm a Democrat, were in trouble. People were upset. And I knocked on this door and this very nice, I don't know, 50-something woman answered the door. She was upset about where government was going. And as a Democrat, I was bearing some of the responsibility for that. She said, my husband and I, we've worked hard all our life, put 3 kids through college, and our taxes just keep going up. And I said, where'd your kids go to college? She said, University of Washington. One went to Highline. And I said, well, you realize taxes pay 2/3 of that education, which was true. And I said, did they go to Mark Vista Elementary around the corner? And oh, yeah. And the library around the corner. You ever go to that? Yeah. And to work and you drive down these roads. And we had this conversation. She said something to me that I loved. After a while, she stopped and looked at me and said, I guess I'm just not as good at arguing as you are. And I'm thinking to myself, no, ma'am, no, you're wrong. There was nothing wrong with that. But I love that line. I can use balance for trust, right? We in government, I think Democrats, have not done as good a job getting taxpayers the value they should get. We got to do a lot more work on that, whether you're talking about the Regional Homeless Authority, the way our criminal justice system is run, the permitting process on building housing. There's a whole lot of things that we could do better. But at the end of the day, if you're going to have a fair, civilized society, you're going to need a balance between the private sector and the public sector, between government and private companies, trying to work to find that balance.
Judy and I built our business around helping downsizers, people who have lived in that family home for a long time. They've been able to generate quite a bit of equity, but when they sell that home, they are taxed over individual $250,000 on capital gains and $500 as a couple. That number has not changed for decades. And in 2013, King County's median price for a home was about $220,000, and now it's
Right.
$765,000. So people who are elderly, ready to downsize, and they're a single person, maybe widowed, they're being taxed greatly on the equity that they have accumulated. Is there any discussion about at least raising the thresholds of those capital gains.
There is from time to time about what that threshold should be. And I think it's a fair argument to ask whether or not it should be raised. But also, again, if we're going to have government function and be fairly funded, you make money, you pay taxes. And capital gain is one area where you're making money. Should the tax be as high as it is? We can certainly have that debate. But if you made substantial changes to that, you would sweep in a lot of people who are very well off. So I would have to weigh those equities between giving another upper middle class tax break, of which there are many, and I'm upper middle class, and I don't mind paying taxes. I feel like I've been fortunate, I've been lucky, and so we do. I would have to try to balance those equities, but certainly at this point, raising what the rate is, I think, a justifiable argument.
Or possibly it could be raised only if your income is a certain level so that there's some kind of balance there to offset it. And so that, like we're talking about the seniors, that they didn't intentionally mean for their home to go up to be $1 million. They bought it 130,000 and now it's $1 million. Yeah.
Wonderful all the way around, actually. Now, it'd be more wonderful if you didn't have to pay taxes on it. But even with the taxes, you'd rather have that than have a house that's still only worth $130,000. I am aware of that challenge. I do have to run in just a couple of minutes. Was there any last thing you wanted to make sure I covered?
You've done an
Did a great
excellent
job,
job.
and we really appreciate you giving us this time. Can't
Well,
thank you enough.
likewise.
And again, if we can do anything, please feel free to let us know.
And to Dennis's question earlier about what chance does the bill have? This is how the bill gets more of a chance. It is just to have an opportunity to make the case, and you give me that.
People's power, their vote, that's the power we have to make a difference.
So lobby, vote.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
vote and also lobby. Tell your elected representatives what's important to you.
I do.
Yes, and that's a good thing.
besides voting, sending letters, phone calls, emails, are these really effective?
Absolutely. It is one of the most misunderstood thing in American politics. I have been a retail politician, elected representative for 33 years. If my constituents say something's important to them, it absolutely matters to me. The more of them who are saying it, the more often they say it. It's not snap your fingers, I want this. Yes, you get it. But it definitely has an impact on any elected official if constituents express their views on a given issue.
Representative Adam Smith, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate you. And you obviously have my vote.
I appreciate that. Realtors are incredibly important in our community, and I appreciate what you do.
Thank you. So
Thank you. Nice to meet you both.
nice meeting you.
That's it, folks.
Wow.
Wow. If you have any feelings, positive or negative, about what we've discussed, contact your legislator. Adam Smith is in my district. I voted for him for years, and I truly appreciate what he is offering and thank him for coming on. Any last comments?
I think to underline that, you reach out to people in Congress, both state and federal. Let them know what you think. Vote. You've got to vote. It's the only tool you have. Not too long ago on the news about a vote in a small town here in Washington that came down to one vote. One of them voted for himself and the other one didn't. And that one vote made the difference. So your vote counts. It always counts. Maybe we could put in a link to register to vote, at least in the state of Washington.
The link to contact Representative Adam Smith.
We'll have that all together on our YouTube channel. Is that correct? Where is it going to be?
You will have the audio downloaded and ready to go. We'll have the video up as soon as possible on our YouTube channel, Getting Your Edge, how to downsize your home life.
One thing I read in his points, and it's when you give numbers, like it really makes a bigger impression. Currently in the United States, 574,000 homes are owned by hedge funds. Last year, they purchased 23% of all single-family homes in the country. That's why it's so important. Call your representative if you want to see middle-class America go back to buying their own homes. That'll be a start. Maybe that will initiate more new construction in the areas where it needs to be. So again, call your representatives, tell them that you want them to consider this bill. We'll have it in the recording for you.
I just read the MLS, and the Northwest MLS covers most of Washington State. There's a few counties over in the southeast portion that it doesn't cover. But closed listings down 26%. It
Mhm.
hasn't been this low before 2000. There are fewer homes to buy. And if the hedge funds are buying a quarter of those, that means you're left with 50% less homes to purchase. Fortunately,
Mhm.
the prices have not risen because of the interest rate.
Are anticipating. I just read a thing today and posted on it in our social media that in general, all the different companies that look at what's going to happen to appreciation, saying there will be 2% appreciation in 2024. That doesn't sound like a lot, but it does significantly raise the price of a home.
Watch out if interest rates get below 5. It's going to
Yeah,
be
crazy.
crazy time again.
If you are thinking about buying, please feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to discuss your options so you can make an informed decision.
That's it for Getting Your Edge How to Right Size Your Home and Life podcast. I hope you got some valuable information from this. Goodbye
Goodbye, Dennis.
for watching.